What happens when a small American town, once torn apart by fear and crime, finds redemption not through force, but through forgiveness? This is the story of Riverstone, where one phone call from a 91-year-old woman changed everything. A retired police chief who refused to give up on her people and turned a town's darkest hour into its greatest transformation. Before we dive in, make sure to hit that subscribe button and turn on notifications, because stories like this, real stories of courage, compassion, and second chances, and deserve to be heard. Now, let's head to Riverstone, where it all began with a single call that no one expected to matter. Riverstone, USA, a quiet town once known for its friendly faces and its growing shadows. When gangs moved in, fear took root. Businesses shut down, people stopped trusting each other, and the line between law and chaos began to blur. But in the middle of that storm stood one woman, Peggy Thompson, a retired police chief who believed that justice wasn't just about punishment. It was about restoration. What started as a desperate call for help soon became a movement that would redefine an entire community. In the quiet town of Riverstone, Virginia, a 90-year-old woman was about to give a notorious biker gang a lesson they would never forget. Margaret Peggy Thompson seemed like any other elderly resident, calm, polite, and reserved. But the day the Shadow Vipers harassed her at a local gas station, they made a serious mistake. What the gang didn't realize was that this soft-spoken grandmother was once one of the most respected officers in the Virginia State Police, with over 200 successful rescue and crisis operations during her long service. When their taunts went too far, Peggy made a single phone call that changed everything. The Shadow Vipers, led by their ruthless leader Havoc, thought they were intimidating an easy target. Instead, they soon found themselves surrounded by more than 50 retired law enforcement officers, men and women whose lives Peggy had once protected on the streets and highways of Virginia. What began as a day of bullying turned into an unforgettable event that reshaped Riverstone's sense of community and respect for those who serve. Before we continue, tell us where you're watching from, and if you enjoy stories like this, make sure to subscribe, because tomorrow's story is one you won't want to miss. The morning sun had just begun to warm Riverstone's quiet streets when Peggy Thompson started her usual routine. Her silver hair was neatly pinned back, her posture still straight from years of service. She guided her aging Ford Taurus into Mike's Gas and Go, the same station she'd visited for over 3 decades. "Good morning, Mrs. Thompson," called Jimmy, the young attendant, with a genuine smile. "The usual today?" "Just a full tank, Jimmy," Peggy replied as she stepped out of her car. Her movements were careful yet steady, a reflection of the discipline that had guided her throughout her career. The familiar mix of gasoline and morning dew filled the air as she began fueling her car. Her mind drifted to the retired officers' meeting she planned to attend later that morning. Those gatherings were more than casual catch-ups. They were a link to a lifetime of service and shared duty. Then the peace broke. The distant rumble of motorcycles grew louder, their engines echoing off the small-town buildings. 5 bikes, then 10, then 15 rolled into the lot, their chrome gleaming under the morning sun. The Shadow Vipers had arrived. Peggy's hand stayed steady on the pump as she watched their reflection in her car window. Training instincts kicked in immediately. Observe, stay calm, assess the threat. Their leader, Havoc, dismounted with casual arrogance. His leather vest displayed patches that spoke of violence and rebellion. His cold stare locked on Peggy. "Well, what do we have here?" he said loudly, drawing laughter from his crew. "Grandma out for her morning drive." Peggy continued fueling her car, her face expressionless. She'd handled tougher situations, drug raids, armed standoffs, high-speed pursuits. This didn't rattle her. "I'm just getting gas," she said evenly. "No reason for any trouble." One biker, tall and unshaven, stepped closer and noticed the license plate frame. Retired state police. "Hey, Havoc, look at this," he called. "The old lady thinks she's a cop." Havoc laughed sharply. "A lady cop? What did you do, write tickets to real officers?" The mockery didn't shake Peggy. They didn't know about the nights she'd spent leading rescue teams through storms, or the countless times she'd pulled injured officers out of danger. She had pulled countless people from danger during her career. The medals she earned now sat quietly in a box in her closet. "I served my state," she said simply, replacing the gas pump. Havoc stepped closer, his boots scraping against the pavement. "Served your state?" He sneered. "The only thing you've served is coffee at a diner." The other gang members spread out, forming a loose circle around her car. Inside the station, Jimmy had vanished, his pale face visible through the glass as he reached for the phone. Peggy knew he was calling for backup, but she also knew help wouldn't arrive fast enough to matter. "You should move along," Havoc continued, his voice lowering to a threat. "This isn't your kind of place anymore. The Shadow Vipers run Riverstone now." Peggy straightened her back, meeting his eyes without flinching. "Young man, I've faced people far tougher than you," she said evenly. "Now, if you'll excuse me, I have somewhere to be." She reached for her car door, but one of the bikers slammed it shut. The sound echoed sharply across the lot. Peggy didn't even blink. She'd heard real gunfire before, faced real danger. This didn't shake her. "Maybe you didn't hear me," Havoc said, leaning in close, his breath hot against her face. "This is our town now, and here you show respect." Peggy's voice stayed calm. "Respect is earned, son, and so far, all I see are boys pretending to be men." The words hung heavy in the air, and for a moment, the only sound was the idle rumble of engines. Then Havoc's face twisted with anger. He grabbed Peggy's arm, his grip hard and bruising. "You want to learn about respect? We'll teach you," he snarled, as his fingers dug into her arm. Peggy's mind flashed back to a night years earlier, when she'd pulled a young rookie officer from a burning patrol car after a crash on the interstate. That officer had grown into Chief Jack "Iron Jack" Morrison, now the head of the state's largest retired law enforcement motorcycle club. She hadn't needed to call him in years. But as she looked into Havoc's cold eyes, she knew that was about to change. The Shadow Vipers had no idea what they'd just started. They were about to learn a real lesson, about strength, discipline, and true respect. And it would begin with a single phone call. Havoc's grip tightened as his gang stepped closer. The morning sun cast long shadows across the cracked pavement, turning the scene into one of quiet intimidation. But Peggy T. Thompson, retired police officer, had faced worse. "Take your hand off me," she said, her voice firm, the same tone she'd once used to command officers during a hostage standoff. Something in her tone made Havoc hesitate. His fingers loosened slightly, but his smirk stayed. "Or what, Grandma? You'll report us?" "I don't make threats," Peggy replied, calmly pulling her arm free. "Never have. But I promise you, you're making a mistake." One of the younger bikers with a snake tattoo wrapping up his neck laughed loudly. "You hear that, Havoc? The old lady's making promises." Peggy used their laughter to slip into her car, her movements deliberate and steady. Through the windshield, she saw Jimmy still on the phone, worry written across his face. She knew the local police couldn't do much. The Shadow Vipers had been terrorizing Riverstone for months, and the department's response had been limited. "You're not going anywhere," Havoc said, pressing his hand down on her hood. "Not until you learn some respect." Peggy started the engine, the familiar hum of her old Taurus filling the air. "Let me tell you something about respect," she said, quietly. "I earned mine pulling men twice your size out of wrecked patrol cars while gunfire echoed around me," Peggy said calmly. "What have you done besides intimidate innocent people?" Her words hit a nerve. Havoc's face darkened, and he gave a quick signal to his crew. Within seconds, the gang surrounded her car, their motorcycles positioned to block every possible exit. "Get out of the car," Havoc ordered. Instead of obeying, Peggy reached for her phone. The sudden motion made several bikers tense, expecting her to call the police. But Peggy wasn't dialing 911, not yet. "You want to see what real respect looks like?" she asked, her fingers hovering over the keypad. "Just wait," Havoc laughed, the sound echoing against the metal roof of the gas station. "Oh, I get it. You're calling for help? Maybe your grandkids, the cops? Go ahead, call whoever you want. We'll still be here." Peggy's mind drifted back to a night many years ago, a stormy evening when she'd responded to a distress call. A young rookie officer was trapped in his burning squad car after a high-speed pursuit went wrong. She'd gone in through the flames, pulling him out seconds before the vehicle exploded. That rookie's name was Jack Morrison. "You boys ever hear of the Retired Officers Brotherhood?" she asked, her finger pressing the first number. Several of the bikers exchanged uneasy looks. The Brotherhood was well known among biker groups, a motorcycle club made up entirely of retired law enforcement officers, led by the legendary Chief Jack "Iron Jack" Morrison. They weren't just any riding club. They were organized, disciplined, and deeply respected, even by outlaw crews. Telling and preparing this story takes time, so if you're enjoying it, subscribe to our channel. It really helps us out. Now back to the story. "What's that got to do with anything?" asked the biker with the snake tattoo curling up his neck. His voice carried a faint hint of uncertainty. "Everything," Peggy replied simply, continuing to dial. "You see, years ago there was a rookie cop who almost didn't make it home. Everyone said it was too dangerous to try to save him. But I went anyway." The phone began to ring. Havoc's expression shifted between anger and confusion. "That officer," Peggy continued, her steady voice carrying across the suddenly silent lot, "was Jack Morrison. People call him Iron Jack now, and he owes me a favor." The line clicked and a deep voice answered. "Morrison," he said. "Jack, it's Peggy Thompson," she replied. "Remember that night out on the interstate?" There was a pause. Then his tone softened with recognition. "Peggy, of course I remember. I wouldn't be here if it weren't for you. What's going on?" Peggy's eyes locked on Havoc's. "I've got some young men here who need a reminder about respect. The Shadow Vipers think they own Riverstone now." The change in Iron Jack's voice was immediate, calm but firm. "Where are you?" "Mike's gas and go," she said, "no rush." "They're not going anywhere," she ended the call. The atmosphere in the lot changed instantly. Several of the bikers exchanged nervous glances. The Shadow Vipers might have ruled Riverstone through fear, but the Retired Officers Brotherhood was something different. Respected, organized, and never ignored. Havoc tried to look composed, but Peggy could see the doubt creeping into his eyes. "You're bluffing," he said. "Iron Jack wouldn't show up just because some old lady called." Peggy gave a faint smile. "You sure about that?" A faint smile played at the corners of Peggy's mouth. "Want to stick around and find out?" she said quietly. In the distance, the distinct rumble of approaching motorcycles began to fill the air. It wasn't the wild, uneven roar of the Shadow Vipers. This was different, steady, unified, and powerful. It was the controlled rhythm of trained riders moving as one. Havoc's expression shifted, his face paling slightly as the sound grew louder. "Mount up!" he barked, trying to keep control. "We're not done here, old lady, not by a long shot." The Shadow Vipers scrambled for their bikes, engines roaring as they sped out of the gas station. Havoc pointed back at Peggy, his hand trembling slightly. "This isn't over. You just made things worse for yourself." Peggy watched them leave, calm and unshaken. She knew they'd be back. Bullies always returned. But this time, the situation had changed. As the steady rumble of the Retired Officers Brotherhood drew nearer, Peggy allowed herself a small, knowing smile. The Shadow Vipers were about to learn what real discipline and unity looked like, and their lesson was only beginning. The morning sun climbed higher, burning away the last traces of dawn. In the bright light, Peggy could see the first group of police motorcycles cresting the hill, their chrome glinting like polished shields. The real story was about to begin. The Brotherhood arrived like thunder, their bikes gliding into the lot in perfect formation, 50 retired officers strong. Each wore a vest marked with patches of their former departments and special units. At their front rode Chief Jack "Iron Jack" Morrison, his silver hair shining in the morning light, his calm authority commanding respect without a single word. Inside the gas station, Jimmy watched wide-eyed from behind the glass. These riders were nothing like the outlaws who had just left. Their movements were organized, deliberate, and professional. The formation of their bikes formed a natural perimeter around Peggy's car, protective but composed. Iron Jack dismounted first, removing his helmet. His lined face showed years of experience, his sharp eyes scanning the area before resting on Peggy. A rare smile softened his stern expression as he approached. "It's been a long time. Captain Thompson," he said, his voice steady with familiarity. "Too long." "Jack," Peggy replied, straightening instinctively. "Though I wish the reunion were under better circumstances." Jack's expression hardened as he looked toward the road where the Shadow Vipers had fled. "Tell me everything," he said. As Peggy recounted what had happened, the gathered officers listened closely, their expressions darkening with every detail. These were people who understood duty and respect. They had earned it through years of service, facing danger together on streets, highways, and in neighborhoods across the state. "The Shadow Vipers," one of the officers muttered. "They've been stirring up trouble along the coast for months. About time someone set them straight." Jack raised his hand, quieting the murmurs. "Peggy here taught me something important a long time ago," he said. "Back when everyone else said a situation was hopeless." Peggy smiled faintly. "I told you that courage isn't about being fearless, it's about doing what's right, even when you're scared." "That's right," Jack nodded. "And you proved that the night you ran that rescue on Highway 12. Bullets flying, cars on fire, and still you didn't back down." A younger retired officer stepped forward, recognition lighting up his face. "Wait a minute. You're the angel of Route 12, the officer who saved that entire patrol team during the crash." Jack smiled. "The one and only." Though she never did like that nickname. Peggy waved away the title. "There were plenty of officers braver than me," she said. "I just did what needed to be done." "Just did what needed to be done," Jack echoed with a chuckle. "She says that like it was nothing. Gentlemen, this woman ran into gunfire and burning vehicles more times than anyone could count, saved my life and countless others. And now some street gang thinks they can intimidate her?" The retired officers standing nearby grew silent, their faces firm with resolve. These men and women understood duty, loyalty, and the bond that came from years of service. "They'll be back," Peggy said calmly. "The Shadow Vipers aren't the kind to walk away." "Let them come," Jack replied, his tone measured but serious. "But first we need to understand what we're dealing with. Tell me about this leader, Havoc." As Peggy described the gang's head, Iron Jack's expression darkened. He recognized the type immediately. A bully who'd never faced real consequences and who mistook fear for respect. "They've been terrorizing Riverstone for months," Jimmy added quietly from nearby, finally finding the courage to speak. "The police can't or won't do anything about it." Jack nodded, a plan already forming in his mind. "Peggy, you've got that community meeting at the precinct this morning, don't you?" "Yes, but under the circumstances." "You'll attend," Jack interrupted with a slight smile. "Just like any other day. But you're not going alone." He turned to his team, his voice steady and commanding, the same tone that once led officers through critical incidents. "Alpha Team, you're on escort duty. Beta and Charlie start patrols. I want eyes on every corner of Riverstone. If the Shadow Vipers want to play tough, we'll remind them how real officers handle things." The Brotherhood moved efficiently, breaking into their assigned groups. Their coordination spoke of long experience and mutual trust. Jack turned back to Peggy, his tone softening. "We'll take care of this, Captain. The old way." Peggy looked around at the assembled officers, men and women who had spent decades serving and protecting their communities. They understood sacrifice, honor, and restraint in ways the Shadow Vipers never would. "Just try not to destroy the town in the process." "Jack, Riverstone's been my home for 40 years, he said with a faint grin. "No promises. But these boys need to learn something. Respect isn't taken. It's earned. And they're about to get a real lesson." As the officers mounted their bikes and patrol vehicles, preparing to escort Peggy to her meeting, she couldn't help but remember another time, when these same men were young officers facing danger every day. Now they were ready to stand together again, not for recognition or glory, but for something just as important, the right for people to live without fear. The morning that had begun with intimidation was now shifting toward justice. As the engines of the retired officers' brotherhood roared to life, the air filled with a sense of purpose. The quiet struggle for Riverstone's peace had just begun. Despite her 90 years, Peggy Thompson once again found herself at the center of it. Iron Jack's voice carried over the sound of engines. "Just like old times, eh, Captain?" Peggy smiled as she got into her car, the officers forming up around her. "Just like old times, Lieutenant. Just like old times." The convoy rolled out of the gas station, a show of discipline and unity that stood in sharp contrast to the chaos of the Shadow Vipers. Inside, Jimmy watched through the window, a small smile spreading across his face. Something was changing in Riverstone, and for the first time in months, it felt like change for the better, across town, inside the abandoned warehouse that served as the Shadow Vipers' clubhouse. Havoc paced the oil-stained concrete floor. His boots echoed as the gang watched him nervously. The morning's confrontation had shaken their confidence, though none would admit it aloud. The retired officer's brotherhood, Havoc muttered, kicking an empty can across the floor. Of all the people in this town, we had to pick her? Snake Tattoo leaned against his bike, trying to look unaffected. So what? They're just another riding club. We've dealt with rivals before. One of the older members, a man called Diesel, shook his head. No, these guys are different. They're not just bikers, they're law enforcement. Organized, disciplined, trained. They've seen real action. Havoc growled, but there was a note of doubt in his voice. Not like them, Diesel insisted. I've heard stories about Iron Jack. He runs that brotherhood like a unit, and that woman, if she really is the one they call the Angel of Route 12. I don't care if she's the Queen of England, Havoc snapped, slamming his fist into a nearby locker. This is our town now. We can't let some old woman and her retired cop friends push us around. We'll lose everything we built here. Meanwhile, Peggy's convoy reached the VA center. The Brotherhood's bikes formed a protective perimeter around the parking lot. As she stepped from her car, several veterans who'd come for the meeting came out to greet her, eyes wide at the escort. Quite an entrance, Peggy smiled. Peggy, Sarah Chen said, Gulf War veteran and leader of the VA support group. I hear you had quite a morning. Word travels fast. Hard to miss 50 Brotherhood bikes rolling through town, Peggy replied, straightening her cardigan. As the meeting began, Peggy recounted the station encounter. The room was full, veterans from Vietnam era to recent conflicts, and their faces moved from anger to determined focus as they heard how the Shadow Vipers had treated one of their own. I remembered something this morning, Peggy said, her voice calm and steady. From one of my toughest calls years ago. We were extracting a patrol after a bad crash. The squad car was on fire. The situation looked hopeless, but we couldn't leave those officers behind. The room fell quiet. Even the Brotherhood members who'd stood outside came in to listen. A younger veteran later asked why she'd risked so much when others said it was too dangerous. Peggy answered, sometimes the biggest act of courage is standing up for others when everyone else looks away. Iron Jack, standing at the back, nodded slowly. That's what we're doing now, standing up for Riverstone. Before anyone could reply, the distant roar of motorcycles filled the air. Through the windows, they watched dust rise on the road to the VA. The Shadow Vipers were coming back, and this time they'd brought reinforcements. Looks like Havoc called in friends, Iron Jack said, counting the bikes as they approached. At least 30 more. Peggy's movement drew every eye in the room. Jack, I won't have violence at the VA. These people come here for healing, not fighting. Agreed, Jack said, already moving to the door. Delta Team, escort our veterans out the back entrance. Everyone else mount up. We'll take this somewhere else. The Brotherhood moved with practiced efficiency, organizing the evacuation and preparing for confrontation. Peggy watched as Sarah Chen coordinated the exit. Proof that training and calm under pressure don't simply disappear. Outside, the Shadow Vipers and their reinforcements formed a line across from the VA, a wall of chrome and engines. Havoc sat in the middle, his face tight with anger and bruised pride. Come on out, old woman, he yelled across the lot. You and your buddies can't hide in there forever. Iron Jack stepped forward first, his presence steady and deliberate. Chief Roberts stood firm, his presence commanding the crowd's attention. Behind him, the Brotherhood took their positions, precise, alert, and ready. Peggy stepped forward last, her head held high, showing no fear. Son, she called out to Havoc, her voice calm but unwavering. You're making a mistake. This isn't about pride or turf. It's about right and wrong. Stand down before someone gets hurt. Before Havoc could respond, the sound of sirens filled the air. 3 patrol cars sped into the parking lot, lights flashing. Chief Roberts, a former Marine, stepped out of the lead car. Nobody fights at my community center, he announced, resting a hand on his sidearm. Havoc, you and your boys need to leave, now. The tension was sharp enough to cut. Havoc looked between the police, the Brotherhood, and Peggy. his expression caught between anger and frustration. Finally, he kicked his bike to life. "This isn't over," he growled. "Not by a long shot." As the Shadow Vipers reluctantly rode off, Iron Jack turned to Peggy. "He's right about one thing," he said quietly. "This isn't over." Peggy watched the dust trail fade across the horizon. "No," she agreed, "but maybe that's not such a bad thing. Sometimes it takes a storm to clear the air." Chief Roberts approached, holstering his weapon. "Peggy, Jack, we need to talk. The Shadow Vipers have been a problem for months. Now they're desperate, and desperate people make dangerous choices." The sun hung high overhead, casting sharp shadows across the parking lot. Peggy looked around at the gathered officers, veterans, and friends. Riverstone was changing. The only question was, would it be for better or worse? The fight for their town's future had just begun, and once again, Peggy found herself in the driver's seat. But this time, the enemy wasn't hidden in a jungle. It was right here in plain sight. Chief Roberts led Peggy, Iron Jack, and several senior Brotherhood members into the station's conference room. The blinds were half closed, stripes of light cutting across the table where they gathered. Outside, the rest of the Brotherhood stood watch. "Let's get to it," Roberts began, spreading a city map across the table. "The Shadow Vipers have been taking over this town piece by piece. They started with protection rackets downtown, then began intimidating shop owners in the historic district. Half the town's scared to talk." Iron Jack leaned forward, tracing the marked areas. "How many are we dealing with?" "Core group's about 25, Roberts replied. "But after today, Havoc's called in help. We're looking at 75 riders total, spread across 3 allied gangs." Peggy studied the map quietly. Her mind worked with the same careful focus that had guided her through a lifetime of service. "They're not acting randomly," she said, pointing to several locations. "They've taken control of every major route in and out of Riverstone. They're not just spreading fear, they're controlling the flow of the town." Roberts nodded. "Good catch. But it gets worse. We've got intel they're moving into narcotics, using Riverstone as a distribution hub." Iron Jack's jaw tightened. "Not anymore, they're not." "Easy, Jack," Peggy cautioned. "We need to be smarter than them." "Chief, why haven't you taken action before now?" Roberts' tone turned heavy. "Politics. The mayor's office doesn't want escalation, and we have reason to believe someone inside City Hall's on their payroll." Meanwhile, across town at the Shadow Vipers warehouse, Havoc held his own meeting. Reinforcements had brought numbers and experience, men who'd dealt with rival crews before. "The Brotherhood's not like the others," warned one of the allied gang riders. "They're trained, organized, and disciplined. Retired cops, maybe feds. Not your typical crew. I don't care what they are," Havoc shouted, slamming his hand on the table. "This is about respect. That old woman embarrassed us in front of the whole town. If we let it slide, we might as well pack up and go." "Maybe we should," Diesel muttered cautiously. "Find an easier town." Havoc shoved him aside. "This isn't about turf anymore, it's personal. Those people think they're better than us, think they can walk in and take what's ours." Back at the police station, the strategy meeting continued. Sarah Chen entered with coffee, her years in law enforcement intelligence still sharp as ever. "We need to remember what we're really fighting for," Peggy said, her voice cutting through the room. "This isn't about territory or pride. It's about the heart of Riverstone." She moved to the window. "I've lived here 40 years. Watched families grow, kids graduate, small businesses thrive. The Shadow Vipers aren't just threatening safety. They're threatening our way of life." Iron Jack nodded. "You're right. But how do we fight them without turning Riverstone into a war zone?" "The same way we've always done it," Peggy replied, turning back to the group. "With focus, information, and careful planning." She pointed to the map again. "They look strong because they spread fear, but fear stretches thin. If we target the right places, they'll start to break." Roberts leaned forward. "What are you suggesting?" "We start with the businesses they're extorting," Peggy said. "The Brotherhood provides protection, shows the community they're not alone. Meanwhile, we collect evidence on their drug operation, proof that even City Hall can't ignore." Roberts nodded, thoughtful. "They won't take that quietly." Peggy gave a faint smile. "They never do." Sarah leaned forward. "They won't take this quietly," she warned. No, Peggy agreed calmly, which is exactly what we're counting on. When people get angry, they make mistakes. Iron Jack nodded, a faint smile forming. Just like that case in Chicago. Draw them in, make them show their hand, then move when they're weakest. Exactly, Peggy said. But this time, we're not fighting with weapons. We're fighting for trust, for the people of Riverstone. They need to see that good officers still exist, that justice still means something. Roberts rubbed his chin thoughtfully. It could work, but it's risky. The Shadow Vipers will retaliate. Of course they will, Peggy replied. But this time we'll be ready. And this time, they'll learn what real strength looks like. Outside, the afternoon sun dipped low, casting long shadows across Riverstone. Across town, residents watched and waited, uncertain but hopeful. The arrival of the Brotherhood, a coalition of retired police officers and community volunteers, had given them something they hadn't felt in months: hope. Iron Jack stood, his decision made. All right, Peggy, we'll do this your way, but you'll have protection around the clock. Havoc's not the type to let this go. Peggy smiled slightly. Jack, I've faced worse men than Havoc, but I appreciate the backup. As the meeting broke up, Sarah caught Peggy by the arm. You know what you're starting here, right? This could change everything. That's the idea, Peggy said, her eyes firm. Sometimes change doesn't happen on its own. Sometimes you have to push for it. The fight for Riverstone was entering a new phase, not through violence, but through resolve, planning, and unity. Peggy Thompson was once again leading the charge, this time to teach a different kind of lesson about courage, respect, and true strength. And this time, the whole town would be watching. The next morning dawned bright over Riverstone's historic district, the sun lighting up the old brick storefronts in shades of gold. The streets were quiet except for the low, steady rumble of police cruisers and Brotherhood patrol vehicles positioned along 3rd Street. Inside Mason's Hardware, the oldest shop in town, Tom Mason was having his first peaceful morning in months. His hands trembled slightly as he counted his register, but it wasn't fear this time. It was relief. They usually show up by now, he said to the 2 Brotherhood officers standing by the door. Every morning, same time, collecting their so-called protection fees. Not today, replied Officer Mike, a retired sheriff's deputy. Across the street, Peggy sat in her usual booth at Diana's diner, sipping her coffee while keeping a clear view of the street. Iron Jack sat opposite her, his own cup untouched. They'll test us, he said quietly. Probably today. I'm counting on it, Peggy answered, scanning the block. Havoc's not the type to walk away. His ego won't let him. As if on cue, the low roar of motorcycles echoed in the distance. The Shadow Vipers appeared at the far end of 3rd Street, their bikes gleaming under the morning sun. Havoc led the group, but his pace slowed as he saw the cruisers and Brotherhood patrols stationed along the block. Right on time, Peggy murmured. Setting down her cup, the Vipers idled, their riders exchanging uneasy looks. The Brotherhood officers didn't move or react. They simply stood watch, a quiet but unmistakable line of authority. Havoc revved his bike, dismounted, and marched toward Mason's Hardware. 2 Brotherhood officers stepped forward, calm but firm. This is private property, Mike said evenly. Mr. Mason isn't interested in your kind of security anymore. Is that right? Havoc sneered. Let's ask him ourselves. Inside the diner, Iron Jack began to rise, but Peggy placed a hand on his arm. Wait, she said softly. Watch how this plays out. Tom Mason stepped out of his store, standing taller than he had in months. Behind him, several other business owners emerged, flanked by Brotherhood officers. You heard them, Havoc, Tom said, his voice carrying across the street. We don't need your protection. We've got real officers watching out for us now. Havoc's hand twitched toward his jacket, but froze as he realized how many police and Brotherhood members surrounded him. No one drew a weapon. No one threatened. They simply stood their ground, firm, silent, and united. This isn't over, old man, Havoc spat, his words sharp with frustration. None of this is over. He turned, locking eyes with Peggy through the diner window. Fury and humiliation twisted across his face. You, he shouted, pointing at her. You think you can just walk in and turn everyone against us? We built this town. Peggy rose slowly, pushing open the diner door. Every eye followed her as she stepped outside. "What exactly did you build, son?" she asked calmly. "Fear, intimidation? That's not building, that's destroying." Business owners and residents had begun to gather, drawn by the confrontation. The shadow vipers, once bold, now shifted uneasily on their bikes. Clearly outnumbered and outmatched. "You don't understand anything," Havoc barked. "This town was dead before we came. We made it strong." "No," Peggy replied evenly, taking another step closer. "You made it afraid. There's a difference." She gestured to the line of officers and volunteers standing behind her. "These men and women know what strength really is. They've faced real danger and stood for something bigger than themselves. That's strength, not fear, not control." The street fell silent. For the first time in months, Riverstone wasn't looking at the shadow vipers with fear, but with defiance. And Peggy knew in that moment, they were starting to win back their town. "You'll never understand this," Peggy said firmly. "Respect isn't taken by force. It's earned through action." Havoc's face twisted with rage as he stepped toward her. But his path was instantly blocked by Iron Jack and 3 Brotherhood officers. "Think carefully about your next move." "Son," Jack said quietly, his voice low but filled with authority. "Very carefully." For a tense moment, silence hung heavy in the air. Then Havoc stepped back, his movements sharp with anger. "This is our town," he shouted, climbing onto his bike. "You want a war? You've got one." The shadow vipers roared away, leaving behind clouds of exhaust and empty threats. When the sound faded, the street stayed silent, until someone started clapping. Others joined in. Applause spreading as residents and business owners emerged from their shops. Tom Mason walked up to Peggy, his voice thick with emotion. "Thank you," he said quietly. "We've been waiting for someone to stand up to them. We were just afraid." "You don't have to be afraid anymore," Peggy assured him. "But this isn't over. Havoc will be back, and he'll want revenge." Iron Jack stepped up beside her, his tone serious. "We've won the first round, but you're right. It's just beginning. He'll come harder next time. Try to make an example out of someone." "Let him try," Peggy replied, watching the growing crowd. "Every move he makes from now on just shows the town who he really is, and who we are." Sarah Chen hurried up, slightly out of breath. "Just got word. The Vipers are regrouping at their warehouse. Havoc's calling in reinforcements." Peggy nodded, unsurprised. "Good. The more forces he pulls in, the easier he is to track." She turned to address the gathered officers and townspeople. "Today we showed them that Riverstone isn't afraid anymore. But tomorrow they'll try to remind us why we should be. We have to be ready." The morning sun broke over the rooftops, lighting the street in gold. For the first time in months, the fear hanging over Riverstone began to lift. But everyone knew the real fight was still coming. Havoc and his gang wouldn't give up easily. Peggy looked around, at the officers standing tall, at townspeople rediscovering their courage, and knew they had already won something important. Riverstone had taken back its dignity, its spirit. Now they had to protect it. That night, the quiet over Riverstone felt uneasy. The Brotherhood officers patrolled the streets, their vehicles moving silently under the streetlights. 2 days had passed since the 3rd Street confrontation, and the tension had only grown heavier, like the calm before a storm. Peggy sat in her living room, reviewing updates from patrol units. In Sarah Chen's kitchen, a makeshift command center had been set up, maps, radios, and marked locations showing the Vipers' latest movements. Activity at their warehouse. Sarah's voice crackled over the radio. "Large group heading out, at least 30 bikes." "Copy that," Iron Jack replied. "All units hold position. Let's see what they're planning." Peggy peeked out her window. 2 patrol cars were parked across the street, engines off, lights out. She knew others were staged nearby, ready to move. Then the night exploded. Glass shattered in the distance. "Fire at Mason's Hardware," came the radio call. Multiple suspects moving fast. Before anyone could respond, another transmission broke through. "Molotov at Diana's Diner. Multiple locations under attack." Iron Jack's voice came steady over the comms. "All units converge downtown. Protection teams hold your sectors." "This is what we trained for." Peggy grabbed her jacket and keys, but Sarah blocked her path. "You're their main target, Peggy. You can't go out there." "They're my people," Peggy said firmly. I started this. I'm not sitting back while others pay the price. Another update came through. They're going after veteran-owned businesses. Pete's auto shop is burning. Peggy and Sarah exchanged a grim look. This wasn't random vandalism. It was a message. Outside, the night sky glowed orange from multiple fires. The sound of sirens and engines blended together. The police and Brotherhood both racing to respond. "Let me through," Peggy demanded as they reached her car. This time, Sarah didn't argue. Downtown Riverstone looked like a war zone. The Vipers had struck with precision, hitting the businesses that had dared to defy them. Fire crews fought to control the flames at Mason's Hardware. Tom Mason stood nearby, staring in disbelief as his family's legacy burned. "They knew exactly when to hit," Iron Jack said grimly as Peggy arrived. "Someone tipped them off. Had to. Probably that contact in City Hall." Peggy nodded. "They're trying to make an example. Show the town what happens when people stand up." Across the street, Diana's diner had been partially saved, thanks to quick action from nearby patrol units. Diana herself, tough, loud, and unfazed, was directing firefighters with one hand and shouting at reporters with the other. "Chief Roberts is coordinating with the state police," Sarah reported, checking her phone. "But Havoc's crew is moving fast. Hit-and-run attacks all over the district." A motorcycle roared past, its rider laughing as he hurled another Molotov. Before it could hit its mark, a Brotherhood officer swung his patrol car into position, blocking the firebomb with the reinforced side door. Flames splashed harmlessly against the vehicle's frame. "Get that rider!" Roberts barked through his radio. Peggy looked around him at the chaos, the flames, the flashing lights, and felt a cold determination settle in. The Shadow Vipers had just escalated the fight, and Riverstone's finest were ready to finish it. A Brotherhood rider intercepted the thrown device, knocking it away. It shattered harmlessly in the street. "This is only the start," Iron Jack warned, watching the flames reflect in nearby windows. "Havoc's showing us what he'll do next. Next time will be worse." As if to confirm him, a new alert came over the radios. "They're at the VA Center. Multiple hostiles armed." Peggy felt the color drain from her face. The VA Center wasn't just a building. It was a refuge for veterans dealing with wounds others couldn't see. "There was a line you didn't cross," Iron Jack growled, already moving for his bike. "Wait," Peggy called. "That's exactly what they want. Draw our forces thin, make us react emotionally." She turned to the gathered veterans and townspeople. "This isn't about property. Havoc's trying to break our spirit to make us helpless." Tom Mason stepped forward, soot streaking his face. "So what then? Let them burn our town?" "No," Peggy replied, her voice carrying the same authority it had in crisis. "We show them that fire tempers steel. It doesn't destroy it." She looked at the crowd, veterans, shop owners, residents, and saw resolve instead of defeat. "Havoc thinks breaking things will break us. Riverstone isn't buildings. It's people. When people stand together, they're stronger than any gang." Others began to arrive with water, supplies, and offers to help. The Shadow Vipers had meant to demonstrate power. Instead, they revealed the town's resilience. "Sarah," Peggy said, turning to her friend, "contact every business owner. Call an emergency meeting tomorrow morning."
"It's time Riverstone showed Havoc what real strength looks like." Iron Jack nodded.
"You thinking Operation Rolling Thunder?" "Something like that," Peggy said, grim but focused. "This time we're not just defending territory. We're defending home." The fires still burned, but they lit scenes of neighbors helping neighbors, veterans standing guard, and a town ready to respond. Havoc had tried to break their spirit. He'd forged it stronger. At dawn, Peggy stood before the damaged VA Center watching volunteers begin repairs. The night attacks were meant to demoralize, but the determined faces around her told another story. Havoc had exposed himself too early, played his hand too aggressively. Now Riverstone set the terms. Peggy at 90 had learned a few strategic lessons in a long life. This campaign would follow a plan. By morning, the community center was full, every seat taken by business owners, residents, and veterans. The air smelled of coffee and resolve. Behind Peggy, a large map of Riverstone marked the prior night's targets. "Last night, the Shadow Vipers showed us what they think power looks like," she began, steady. "Today we'll show them what real strength is." Tom Mason rose, ash still on his hands. They've got numbers, weapons, and someone feeding them info from City Hall. How do we beat that? Because they confuse damage with strength, Peggy answered with a small, firm smile. I learned something long ago. True strength isn't how much harm you cause. It's how much you can take and still stand up. Iron Jack stepped forward and unfolded a document. We just closed on the old River Street factory, he announced. The Brotherhood bought it this morning, legally. It's our new headquarters, murmurs spread. The factory sat at a crossroads with a view over downtown, strategic and symbolic. But that's not all, Peggy continued. Every business attacked last night, we'll rebuild them. Not one at a time, all of them, today. How? Diana from the diner asked. Most of us don't have insurance for this. You don't need it, Sarah said, stepping up. The Brotherhood set up a community restoration fund. Members have chipped in, enough to rebuild. The room buzzed with disbelief and relief. Iron Jack raised a hand. Phase 1, rebuild. Phase 2, make sure it never happens again, Peggy pointed to the map. The Vipers rely on town infrastructure. Gas stations, eateries, routes. They need the town to run. If we secure those points, they lose mobility and shelter. A voice from the back asked the question everyone was thinking. What about their inside source? Peggy met Chief Roberts' eyes. We identify and cut the leak, he said. You don't undermine a whole town without help from within. First, Peggy added, we protect people. Then we gather evidence, real, undeniable proof. With that, even City Hall can't look the other way. Roberts nodded. We'll coordinate with state partners for forensics and warrants. No vigilante action, legal, solid cases. Good, Iron Jack said. And the Brotherhood will train local businesses on security. Panic buttons, cameras, basic response. We'll station teams at critical sites. Peggy looked around the room at the faces, tired, angry, but steady. This isn't revenge, she said. It's restoration. We'll show Riverstone that courage looks like rebuilding, not burning. Over the next hours, volunteers moved into action. Teams cleared debris, patched windows, and set up temporary lighting. Brotherhood members trained staff on emergency protocols, while police canvassed for witnesses and reviewed patrol patterns. Evidence collection teams started tracing phone calls and transaction records that might point to a mole. Havoc's strategy had been to terrorize and coerce. Riverstone's answer was to organize, document, and defend legally. The night's fires had been an escalation, but they'd also provided trails, timing, routes, and methods that investigators could follow. As the sun set on a battered but busy town, Peggy stood with Sarah and Iron Jack, watching volunteers unload supplies. This is it, she said quietly. We hold our ground. We rebuild. We don't let fear win. Iron Jack clapped a hand on her shoulder. And when Havoc makes his next move, we'll be waiting, with evidence, with witnesses, and with a town that refuses to be bullied. Riverstone had shifted from victim to community, defending itself through law, solidarity, and determination. The battle for the town's future had not ended, but now it had direction, leadership, and a plan grounded in law and civic action. Chief Roberts spoke up from the back. We already handled the leak inside City Hall. Last night we fed them false patrol routes. The info they got was what we wanted them to have. Now we know exactly how their intel is moving. A spark of hope spread through the room. Peggy could see it in their faces. The realization that they weren't powerless anymore. Here's what happens next, she continued. Every business they damaged reopens by sunset. We work together, officers, residents, everyone. We show them they can't shut us down or crush our spirit. Tom Mason stood again. My store's a mess, Chief. There's no way we'll be ready by then. Sunset's soon, but you'll have help, Roberts assured him. Half our department's got off-duty officers volunteering. The rest are community responders and reserve units, people who know how to follow orders and get results. Sarah stepped forward, holding a stack of papers. We've divided the town into zones. Each has a police coordinator and a civilian liaison. Everything's organized, everything's ready. All we need now is you. The room went quiet as the weight of what they were proposing settled in. Then Diana stood up. Well, what are we waiting for? My diner's not going to rebuild itself. The meeting shifted into motion. People grouped by zones, organizing supplies and manpower. The police department distributed radios and safety gear. while Sarah's team handed out detailed recovery plans. Peggy watched from the front, reminded of past times when people stood together under pressure. Havoc had tried to break them, but he'd only united them. Outside, the sound of rebuilding had already begun. Police volunteers and local contractors cleared debris from Mason's hardware, while trucks unloaded new materials. The street filled with people carrying tools, lumber, and renewed confidence. "You know Havoc won't take this quietly," Chief Roberts said, stepping beside Peggy. "I'm counting on it," she replied. "But this time, when he strikes, he won't be hitting scattered targets. He'll be facing an organized town." Sarah came over with a radio update. "Got eyes on the Vipers. They're parked along the outer roads, watching everything." "Good," Peggy nodded. "Let them watch. Let them see what happens when a community refuses to be broken." By midday, Riverstone was buzzing with activity. Officers worked alongside civilians. Businesses helped one another. And the town Havoc tried to intimidate showed its real character: resilient, united, and determined. By afternoon, Mason's hardware had a new roof. Diana's Diner was serving free coffee to workers from a temporary counter. The community center repairs were nearly done, and upgrades were already being added. Peggy stood in the street watching her plan unfold. The Vipers had tried to burn Riverstone's spirit. Instead, they had sparked something stronger, something no amount of fear could destroy. The fight wasn't over, but the rules had changed. Havoc was about to learn what real power looked like. At an abandoned warehouse on the edge of town, Havoc watched surveillance footage on a laptop. His knuckles tightened around a beer bottle as he saw downtown Riverstone alive with activity. "They rebuilt everything," Snake muttered in disbelief. "In one day, like we never touched it. Not just rebuilt," Havoc growled. "Look closer." The footage showed more than repairs. New cameras on every corner, reinforced doors, uniformed officers visiting shops, and police vehicles parked at key intersections. What had been a vulnerable town was becoming secure, coordinated, and ready. "They're organized," Diesel said quietly. "Police precision. This isn't just cleanup, it's reinforcement." Havoc threw his bottle against the wall, glass scattering across the floor. "That old woman's not just fighting back. She's rewriting the rules." The warehouse door opened and their inside contact, a nervous clerk from City Hall, rushed in. "We've got bigger problems," he stammered. "The police department just signed security contracts with 20 local businesses. They're going official, licensed, insured, and funded. They're replacing our protection racket with legitimate law enforcement." Havoc's jaw clenched. "What about the patrol routes I paid you for?" The clerk shook his head. "They fed me false data. Chief Roberts knows there's a leak. If I send anything else, I'm done. They'll trace it back to me." Across town, in the newly converted police operations center inside the old River Street station, Peggy reviewed live security feeds. Screens displayed every corner of Riverstone, part of Sarah's new digital network, built to protect the town and gather evidence of any criminal activity. "They're getting desperate," Roberts said, watching footage of Viper members loitering at the outskirts. "They've lost their income, their informants, their intimidation. Desperate men make reckless choices." "Desperate men are dangerous," Peggy replied, her tone calm but certain. "Havoc's got too much pride to walk away. He'll try something bold." Sarah entered with a tablet. "You were right to follow the money," she said, scrolling through financial data. "The Viper's cash flow is drying up fast, and their sponsors are pulling back." Peggy nodded slowly. "That means they'll strike soon and they'll aim big. But this time, when they come, they won't be facing victims. They'll be facing law, order, and a united community." The Riverstone Police Task Force had uncovered something far bigger than local street crime. The gang wasn't just running protection rackets. They were part of a major drug distribution network operating across 3 states, using Riverstone as their central hub. "That puts us in federal territory," Chief Roberts said from his post near the door. "The DEA would be very interested in this." "Not yet," Peggy replied, studying the files on her desk. "We need them to believe they still have control. If we push too fast, they'll panic and make a move that puts innocent people at risk." Before Roberts could respond, the radio crackled. "Multiple vehicles entering town from the north," came a report from a patrol unit. Not bikes, heavy trucks. At least 4. Roberts grabbed his binoculars and moved to the window. Looks like Havoc's calling in his suppliers. Those aren't local trucks. Peggy watched the live surveillance feed on the new police network. The vehicles moved with tactical precision, far too organized for a street gang. Cartel connection, Sarah said, checking the database. The Vipers have been acting as middlemen between the suppliers and small-town distributors. If they lose Riverstone, they lose their entire pipeline. Exactly, Peggy said, turning to face the room. This is no longer just about our town. Havoc's brought in people who don't care who gets caught in the crossfire. Outside, the trucks began splitting up, heading in different directions across Riverstone. Patrol units kept a safe distance, tracking them without engagement. They're setting up new bases, Roberts observed. Scattering so we can't shut them all down. No, Peggy corrected, eyes narrowing at the map. They're creating a perimeter. They're surrounding us. Roberts instinctively checked his sidearm. We should call in the state police. Not yet, Peggy said firmly. If this becomes an open operation, we risk civilian casualties. We handle it quietly, on our terms. She marked the truck's positions on the town map. Havoc's trying to show us he has powerful friends. But he just showed us something else, fear. He wouldn't bring in outside help if he thought he could handle this himself. What's the plan? Roberts asked, deferring to her experience. We let them believe they're in charge, Peggy replied, a strategy forming in her mind. Let them get comfortable, establish routines. Meanwhile, we document everything. Movements, meetings, supply drops. Build a case solid enough to bring down the entire network. Sarah nodded. Like building a federal task force file. Exactly, Peggy said. But when we hand it off, we don't just take down Havoc. We take down everyone above him. The room fell silent as the weight of their mission sank in. They weren't just protecting Riverstone anymore. They were about to expose a multi-state criminal enterprise. It's going to get worse before it gets better, Peggy warned. These new players don't care about rules or consequences. Then we make sure no one gets hurt, Roberts said firmly. Double patrols. Increase business security. Nobody in Riverstone stands alone. As the sun dipped below the horizon, Peggy watched the trucks settle into position on the monitors. Havoc believed he was showing strength by bringing in cartel connections. But in truth, he'd revealed his weakness. For the first time, they had a chance to dismantle something far bigger than a local gang. But first, they had to survive what was coming. Havoc and his new partners wouldn't go quietly, and the next fight wouldn't just happen on the streets of Riverstone. Could hit anywhere they could hurt the town and its people. The real battle was about to begin. A tense week followed. The cartel trucks fortified abandoned buildings around Riverstone, turning them into guarded compounds. The Vipers patrolled with newfound confidence, emboldened by their dangerous allies. Late one night, Peggy sat in her living room, surrounded by photos and surveillance reports. Sarah's secure computer system kept her connected to the task force command center. Movement at the North Warehouse. Sarah's voice came through the encrypted line. Large shipment arriving. Record everything, Chief Roberts replied over the channel. We're building the case. A knock at Peggy's door drew her attention. Tom Mason stood there, anxious but resolute. They came by my shop today, he said as she let him in. Offered to buy it. 3 times what it's worth, Peggy frowned. They're not buying your store, Tom, they're buying your silence. I figured as much, he said. And they're doing it all over town, offering crazy money for key properties. Some folks are tempted. Before she could answer, the radio came alive again. Multiple vehicles approaching from the south. Not cartel. Different formation. Peggy pulled back her curtain and saw sleek black SUVs gliding through the streets. They moved with precision, calm, coordinated, and clearly trained. Not cartel, Sarah said, analyzing the feed. Not law enforcement either. Private military contractors. Roberts' voice came through, grim and controlled. He's escalating. Those aren't thugs. Those are hired guns. Peggy watched the SUVs spread across town, her mind already working. Bringing in professionals means he's preparing something big. At an abandoned warehouse, Havoc met with the contractor's leader, a cold, clean-cut man who introduced himself simply as Marshall. Your little turf war has drawn too much attention, Marshall said bluntly. My employers want this resolved quickly and quietly. This isn't a turf war, Havoc snapped. This is about respect. This is about business, Marshall interrupted sharply. The cartel can't afford disruptions in its distribution line. You have 48 hours to settle this, or we will. The warning hung heavy in the air. Havoc's anger flickered into something closer to fear. What about the old woman, the cop? He demanded. Marshall's thin smile didn't reach his eyes. Professional problems require professional solutions. Back at Riverstone PD's new operations center, formerly an abandoned factory, Peggy called an emergency briefing. The line had officially been crossed. This was no longer a gang problem. It was organized crime. Armed and expanding, and before it was over, the Riverstone Police Department would have to prove that law and community still meant something. Even against an army for hire, the situation had grown far beyond what the Riverstone Police Task Force initially expected. These contractors change everything, Peggy told the assembled officers. They're not street thugs we can scare off, or local criminals we can outsmart. They're trained professionals, hired guns. We've had tactical experience too, Chief Roberts reminded her. Yes, Peggy replied, but we also have something to lose. They don't care about collateral damage, or this town. Sarah pulled up live surveillance from their command center. On the monitors, the contractors were seen establishing sniper nests and escape routes. This is full-scale tactical prep, Sarah reported. Military-grade precision. Then we respond the same way, Roberts said. Call in backup, our state partners, maybe even the feds. Peggy shook her head. That's exactly what they want. If this escalates into an official standoff, civilians will get caught in the crossfire. So what's the plan? Roberts asked, the strain in his voice clear. Peggy moved to the operations map, tracing routes only she seemed to understand. We let them think they've got us cornered. Let them get comfortable, overconfident. Meanwhile, we prepare for their real goal. And what's that? Sarah prompted. Peggy looked up. All of this, the cartel, the contractors, it's about Havoc's pride. He can't back down. He needs to prove he can break me to save face. The room went silent as the realization sank in. You're not saying, Roberts began. I am, Peggy interrupted. We give him what he wants, a clear shot at me. But on our terms, not his. That's too risky, Sarah protested. These aren't amateurs. They're professionals trained to kill. Peggy's expression hardened, but her tone stayed calm. So was the sniper who tried to take me out in my early years on the force. I'm still here, she addressed the room. Havoc thinks hiring contractors gives him the edge. But professionals follow patterns, stick to protocols. We can use that against them. The strategy meeting stretched into dawn as they refined the plan. The visible police presence would appear to withdraw, giving the impression that the department was backing down. In reality, they were setting traps, reinforcing hidden surveillance points and preparing airtight evidence. We're not just protecting Riverstone anymore, Peggy reminded them. We're protecting every small town that could be next. As the meeting ended, Roberts pulled her aside. You know they'll come for you. I'm counting on it, Peggy said. Sometimes the only way to spring a trap is to walk right into it. The sun rose over Riverstone, casting long shadows from the contractors' lookout points. Two forces prepared for a confrontation, one driven by money and pride, the other by duty and protection. The next 48 hours would decide more than just the fate of Riverstone. They'd define the future of everyone in it. Peggy Thompson had faced danger before. She'd stared it down in dark alleys and hostage standoffs, but this time was different. This was her town, and she wasn't about to let it fall. At dawn, the police patrols that had become a familiar sight in Riverstone were suddenly gone. Their absence left the streets eerily calm. To any observer, it looked like the police had finally backed off. Peggy walked alone down Main Street toward Diana's diner, her steps slow and deliberate. Through the reflection in the windows, she counted at least 3 surveillance teams tracking her. They were good, professional, but she'd spent too many years spotting threats to miss them. You shouldn't be out here alone, Diana warned as Peggy slid into her usual booth. Not with those men watching. That's exactly why I need to be here, Peggy said, taking her coffee. Let them watch. Down the street, Marshall, the contractor's commander, watched from a parked SUV. His cold eyes followed Peggy as he spoke into a secure radio. Target is moving predictably. Exposed. Either she's gotten careless, or it's a setup, Havoc interrupted through the static. That old woman's smarter than she looks. Doesn't matter, Marshall replied. Predictable targets are dead targets. At the Riverstone PD's temporary command post, now disguised as an abandoned office building, Sarah monitored multiple camera feeds covering the entire downtown area. Robert stood behind her, watching the map. 4 sniper teams, Sarah said, marking the screen, and 3 ground teams disguised as civilians. They're building a kill zone, just like Peggy predicted. Roberts nodded grimly. They're following standard elimination protocols. Overlapping angles, clean exits. This is surgical. Sarah zoomed in on another feed. Havoc was pacing outside a warehouse, clearly agitated. He's losing control, Roberts observed. The cartel and the contractors don't care about his vendetta anymore. They just want the problem gone. Throughout the morning, Peggy maintained her routine, stopping at the hardware store, walking through the park, chatting with residents. Every step was watched, every action recorded by the mercenaries. She's making it too easy, Marshall muttered, watching her on a monitor. Maybe she's just tired, his second-in-command suggested. She's pushing 70, right? Marshall's tone turned cold. Age doesn't matter. I've seen her type before. The calm ones, the ones who've seen the worst. They're always the most dangerous. At the old warehouse, Havoc's patience snapped. Just take the shot. What are you waiting for? Marshall's voice came back through the radio, sharp and controlled. We do this clean or we don't do it at all. Professional work requires patience. What neither of them noticed was the quiet rhythm of the town itself. Every time Peggy stopped to talk with someone, a shopkeeper, a passerby, small bits of coded information changed hands. The people of Riverstone weren't running away. They were part of the plan, and by the time Havoc and his contractors realized it, it would already be too late. The friendly wave carried meaning few could see. The Riverstone Police Tactical Unit hadn't backed off. They'd simply gone underground, blending in with local residents. Sarah's calm voice came through Peggy's concealed earpiece. Cartel movement confirmed. They're moving product through the North Safe House. We've got it all on video. Good, Peggy murmured while pretending to browse a store window. Keep recording. How's our guest holding up? He's nervous, Sarah replied. Ready to talk. The guest was a city hall clerk, the insider who'd been leaking patrol routes to the criminal network. The police task force had quietly detained him the night before, offering him a choice, a full confession or federal charges. By late afternoon, Marshall had finalized his tactical setup. His private security teams were in position, sniper posts, escape routes, radio frequencies. Everything checked and double-checked. To his professional eye, it was a flawless operation. Green light for tonight, Marshall said into his comm. We end this after sundown. Havoc, listening on a separate channel, gave a crooked smile. Finally. But in the growing dusk, another kind of movement went unseen. Police officers who had seemed to vanish from town were quietly returning, taking up hidden positions. Surveillance teams documented every move, each mercenary's location, every cartel handoff, every illegal transaction. Inside Diana's diner, Peggy sat at her regular booth as night settled over Riverstone, sipping her coffee calmly. Through the window, she saw Marshall's black SUV pull up. The commander had decided to handle this one himself. The bell above the door jingled. Marshall entered with 2 of his men, their tactical jackets blending in just enough. Around them, the other customers, undercover officers, appeared to pay no attention. Mrs. Thompson, Marshall said smoothly, sliding into the booth across from her. Time we had a talk. I was wondering when you'd stop hiding behind a scope, Peggy replied, meeting his cold stare with steady eyes. This is a professional courtesy, he said. A chance to end this quietly, Peggy smiled faintly. Is that what we're calling paid hits now? Professional courtesy? Marshall didn't flinch. You've made enemies who don't tolerate interference. Walk away now, or don't walk away at all. I've faced tougher men than you, Peggy said evenly. Men who fought for more than a paycheck. What are you really fighting for, Marshall? For a moment, Something flickered behind his eyes. Doubt, maybe recognition, but it was gone as quickly as it came. "You've got 1 hour to leave town," he said flatly, standing up. After that, what happens next isn't personal. It's just business. As he left the diner, Peggy took another sip of her coffee, her expression calm. Everything was unfolding exactly as planned. The mercenaries were committed. The cartel was moving its product. And Havoc was about to learn the hard truth about real control. The next hour would change everything, though not in the way Marshall or Havoc expected. Because while they were watching Peggy, they hadn't noticed what was happening in the shadows. And in those shadows, a trap years in the making was about to spring shut. The final hour ticked down. Night had fully claimed Riverstone, turning its familiar streets into dark corridors of tension. Inside his armored vehicle, Marshall watched the countdown on his tactical display. "All teams confirm final positions," he ordered. Voice low and professional. "Team 1 in position. Team 2 ready. Team 3, target acquired. Team 4, green." Peggy remained seated in the diner, motionless. To anyone watching, she appeared completely unaware. A woman doing a crossword, her pen resting idle for minutes. "Target hasn't moved," one spotter reported. "Still inside. No police presence detected." Marshall frowned. In his experience, cops didn't just give up, especially not veterans of the force. "Something wasn't adding up, sir," his second-in-command said. "Cartels reporting gaps in their camera feeds. Some blind spots on the outskirts." "Be specific," Marshall snapped. "Nothing solid. Just areas where surveillance keeps going dark." At the cartel's warehouse, Havoc was pacing restlessly. The cartel representatives were losing patience. "This should have been finished days ago," one said sharply. "Your personal grudge is getting expensive." "Just wait," Havoc snapped. "Once that old cop's gone, everything goes back to normal." The cartel man's smile was razor thin. "Nothing goes back to normal after tonight. There will be changes." Back at the diner, Peggy checked her watch. Sarah's voice came quietly through the earpiece. "All units in position. DEA teams are on standby." "Understood," Peggy murmured. "Time to show our hand." The last seconds of Marshall's countdown expired. He reached for his radio, ready to give the final order. But before he could speak, every light in Riverstone went out at once. For a moment, the entire town was plunged into pitch darkness. Then one by one, high-intensity spotlights flared to life from hidden positions, cutting through the night and exposing every mercenary sniper nest. Every vantage point, every surveillance post were compromised. Team 2 shouted over the radio. "Multiple hostiles and closing fast." Marshall grabbed his night vision goggles, scanning the chaos. What he saw froze him in place. The Riverstone police hadn't pulled out. They'd simply repositioned. Now, from alleys, rooftops, and empty storefronts, tactical units were emerging with precision that could only come from weeks of coordination. The hunters had just become the hunted. "Fall back to secondary positions," Marshall ordered. But it was already too late. Team 4 is pinned down. Team 1 under fire. "We've lost contact with Team 3, crackled the comms. Inside Diana's diner, Peggy stood calmly and walked to the window as chaos erupted outside. Diana and the other customers revealed themselves, undercover tactical officers, moving with practiced precision to secure the building. "Marshall," Peggy spoke into her radio, knowing the mercenary commander was monitoring every channel. "I think we need to revisit that talk about professional courtesy." Outside, the deep thrum of helicopters filled the air. Not military aircraft, but DEA choppers moving into position. Across town, cartel safe houses were being surrounded by federal agents who'd been waiting for this exact moment. "You planned this." Marshall's voice came through the radio, a mix of irritation and reluctant respect. "The patterns, the timing, it was all a setup." "Of course it was," Peggy replied evenly. "Did you really think a retired police captain would be that careless? Every step we took was meant to draw you in, to make you commit your teams exactly where we wanted them." At the cartel's main warehouse, panic spread fast. Their representatives were trying to flee, only to find every escape route blocked by federal units. Havoc stood at the center of the chaos, his disbelief written all over his face. "This," Peggy continued, her voice steady and firm, is how real law enforcement operates. Not with brute force, but with strategy. Not with fear, but with control. Marshall's SUV skidded around a corner, only to find its path blocked by tactical vehicles. Every exit, every fallback route, every contingency plan had already been mapped and neutralized. "You have two choices, Marshall," Peggy said into the radio. "Surrender now and face federal charges, or try to fight your way out against officers who've spent their lives mastering this craft." "What's it going to be, Commander? What's the professional choice?" A long silence followed. Then, with the weary tone of a man who knew the game was over, Marshall's voice came back. "All units, stand down." One by one, the mercenaries emerged from cover, weapons dropped, hands raised. Professionals to the end, they obeyed the order without a word. But it wasn't over. Not yet, because while the hired guns surrendered, Havoc and his gang were still at large, and desperate men were the most dangerous kind. Before dawn could break over Riverstone, Havoc stood inside the Shadow Viper warehouse, watching his empire crumble on the security monitors. Outside, DEA agents were cuffing cartel associates. Marshall's mercenaries were being taken into custody. Everything he'd built was falling apart. "It's over," Diesel muttered. "We should surrender." Havoc's laugh was hollow, tinged with madness. "That old cop thinks she's won? She hasn't seen what I'm really capable of." He strode to a locked storage room, punching in a code. The steel door slid open, revealing the cartel's hidden stockpile, crates packed with high explosives, enough to flatten half of downtown. "Boss," Snake Tattoo froze, eyes wide. "That's too far. We're criminals, not terrorists. We're whatever I say we are," Havoc shouted, loading the explosives into a van. "If I can't have Riverstone, neither can she." At the police command center, Sarah's voice came sharply through the radio. "Chief, movement at the warehouse. Thermal scans show them loading something heavy into trucks." "What kind of something?" Iron Jack asked, eyes on the monitors. Sarah hesitated. "Explosives. Industrial grade." Peggy's expression hardened. This wasn't about territory anymore. It wasn't even about revenge. It was about destruction. "All units," she commanded, her tone unwavering. "Havoc's gone rogue. He's loaded with enough explosives to take out half the town. We stop him before he reaches any populated area." Riverstone PD mobilized instantly. Patrol cars roared to life. Even the surrendered mercenaries looked uneasy. Professionals knew there were lines you didn't cross, and Havoc had just crossed them all. "You're not going out there," Iron Jack protested as Peggy headed for her unmarked cruiser. "The hell I'm not," she shot back. "This started with me. I'm going to end it." Moments later, the Shadow Viper's convoy burst from their warehouse, motorcycles and vans tearing through the streets, Havoc leading the charge. Many of his own men had refused to follow, but the ones who did were loyal to the end, and just as reckless. "He's heading downtown," Sarah reported, tracking their signal. "If those explosives go off near the historic district, he won't make it that far." Peggy cut in, turning onto Main Street. Her old Ford Taurus wouldn't outrun the bikes. But she had one advantage Havoc didn't. She knew every alley, every shortcut, every turn in Riverstone. The quiet night erupted into a high-speed pursuit through the heart of town. Tactical officers and DEA agents raced to clear civilians from potential blast zones, while the Shadow Vipers weaved through traffic, their engines howling. Over intercepted radio chatter, Havoc's laughter echoed, wild and broken. "You should have left it alone, old lady," he taunted. "Now everyone gets to see what real power looks like." Peggy didn't answer. She just tightened her grip on the wheel, calculating angles and timing with the same precision she once used on active patrol. She wasn't chasing revenge. She was chasing justice, and she knew this chase would end where it all began, in the streets of Riverstone. "Sarah," Peggy called over the radio, her tone sharp but calm. "Remember that construction site on Maple Street? The new shopping center?" "What about it?" Sarah replied. "Have patrol units block off the west side and push Havoc east onto 3rd. Iron Jack's voice came through next, steady under pressure. "That construction site's a dead end, Chief." "Exactly," Peggy answered. The Riverstone Police Task Force moved quickly, their cruisers and bikes funneling the Shadow Viper convoy exactly where Peggy wanted them. Havoc, focused entirely on destruction, Didn't realize he was being steered into a trap until it was too late. The convoy burst onto the unfinished construction site and stopped cold. Concrete barriers sealed every exit except the way they'd come. And that route was already blocked by flashing lights and armored police vehicles. Havoc jumped off his bike, clutching a detonator in his shaking hand. "Back off!" One click and this whole place blows. Peggy's unmarked Taurus rolled to a stop near the side entrance. She stepped out slowly, her movements controlled and deliberate. "Is this really what you wanted, Havoc?" she called out. "To prove you're the most dangerous man in Riverstone? Congratulations, and you've done it. You've proven you're willing to kill innocent people just to feed your ego." "Shut up," Havoc screamed, his grip trembling. "You did this. You turned everyone against me." Peggy took a slow step forward. "No, Havoc, you did that every time you chose fear over respect. Every time you mistook cruelty for strength." Around him, the remaining gang members hesitated. They'd signed up for money and intimidation, not mass murder. The growing circle of officers closing in only made their doubt worse. "One more step and I'll do it," Havoc shouted. "I'll take us all out." Peggy didn't flinch. She kept moving forward, her eyes steady on his. "No, you won't. Because deep down, you're still that scared kid trying to prove he's tough. Real strength isn't about who you can hurt, Havoc. It's about who you can protect." For a moment, something flickered in Havoc's eyes. Fear, doubt, maybe even understanding. Then his thumb twitched on the detonator. A single gunshot cracked through the air. Diesel, Havoc's oldest friend and right-hand man, had made his choice. The bullet struck Havoc's hand, sending the detonator spinning to the ground. The Shadow Viper's last stand ended not with an explosion, but with the click of handcuffs and the quiet sob of a broken man. Federal agents moved in, securing the explosives and taking the remaining suspects into custody. Peggy watched silently as the chaos subsided. The night had nearly ended in tragedy, but something else had happened instead. A kind of redemption from within the gang itself. "You knew," Iron Jack said as he approached, watching the scene. "You knew someone would stop him." "I knew his own people would make the right call," Peggy replied. "Sometimes the biggest victory isn't defeating your enemy, it's helping them find their conscience." Dawn was breaking over Riverstone, and with it came a sense of renewal. But Peggy knew the story wasn't finished yet. There was still one more truth to uncover. The next morning dawned clear and calm. The Shadow Viper warehouse was now a federal crime scene, every secret dragged into daylight. For the first time in months, downtown business owners opened their doors without fear. Peggy sat in her usual booth at Diana's diner. Watching the town slowly come back to life, Iron Jack slid into the seat across from her, setting down a steaming cup of coffee. "DEA found enough evidence to lock Havoc up for decades," he said. "The cartel connection alone carries at least 20 years. Probably more. And the others?" Peggy asked quietly, thinking of the gang members who'd refused to follow Havoc's final orders. "Diesel's cooperating with investigators," Iron Jack replied. "Most of the Vipers are facing reduced charges. The ones who walked away before the explosives incident might even get plea deals." Diana approached the table, coffee pot in hand. "You should see what's happening out there," she said with a faint smile. "Former Vipers are helping clean up the fires from last week. Some of them even came by to apologize." Peggy turned to the window. Outside, she could see it. Men who once terrorized Riverstone now working alongside police and local volunteers, clearing debris and rebuilding storefronts. Their leather vests still carried the Shadow Viper insignia, but something had clearly changed. "They're lost," Iron Jack said softly. "Their leader's gone. Their purpose is gone. They need direction." Peggy nodded slowly, her eyes still on the street. "Maybe that's exactly what they need, a new purpose. A second chance to stand for something better." Sarah Chen entered the diner, carrying a folder and looking exhausted but satisfied. "Marshall and his mercenaries are being transferred to federal custody," she reported. "But there's something else. Marshall asked to speak with you personally." Later, in a secure room at the Riverstone Police Department, Marshall sat handcuffed to a steel table. Despite his situation, his professional composure hadn't cracked. When Peggy entered, he stood as much as the restraints allowed, an instinctive gesture of respect. "You outmaneuvered us completely," he said plainly. I've run operations for 15 years. I've never seen anything like it. Peggy met his gaze. That's because you were looking for the wrong things. Peggy leaned back in her chair across from Marshall. You saw an old woman and a small-town police chief, she said evenly. But you never saw what really mattered. The spirit of this place, the strength of its people. Marshall nodded slowly. I saw the tactical situation. You saw the human one. That's why you won. Is that all you wanted to tell me? Peggy asked. No, Marshall replied, leaning forward slightly. I wanted to offer my services. When I get out, and I will eventually, I'd like to work with you. Your department, your community programs. They could use someone with my skills. Peggy studied him quietly for a long moment. You're right, she said finally. We could use someone like you, but only if you understand what we actually fight for. It's not about control or power. It's about protection, community, and making things better. Marshall's expression softened, the professional facade cracking just a little. I understand, he said. That's exactly why I'm offering. Out on the streets of Riverstone, change was spreading, slowly but steadily, like ripples through calm water. The remaining members of the Shadow Vipers, those who had chosen redemption over destruction, were finding new places in the community they once terrorized. Tom Mason had hired 2 of them to help rebuild his hardware store. They're good workers, he told Peggy. They just needed someone to give them a chance. At the Community Outreach Center, Sarah was coordinating a new program to help former gang members transition into stable, productive lives. Several officers from the Riverstone Police Department had volunteered as mentors. It's like you said, Sarah explained to Peggy one afternoon. Sometimes the biggest victory isn't about arrests or charges. It's about helping people find their conscience. The transformation wasn't easy. There were still doubts, old grudges, and uneasy stares. But something fundamental had changed. Riverstone had faced its darkness and come out stronger. Not through force, but through understanding. That evening, Captain Jack Iron found Peggy sitting on her porch, watching the sunset stretch across the quiet streets. You planned this all along, didn't you? He said, half smiling. Not just stopping havoc, changing the town completely. Not exactly, Peggy replied, smiling faintly. But I hoped for it. Sometimes people just need to be shown a better path. Even the ones we think are too far gone. A motorcycle rumbled past her house. One of the reformed Shadow Vipers, still wearing his old vest but now with a new patch stitched above it. Riverstone Community Watch. They're calling you the heart of Riverstone now, Iron Jack said. The one who believed in second chances. Peggy shook her head. I just remembered something I learned early in my career. The real battle isn't always with the criminal in front of you. Sometimes it's with the darkness inside people. And sometimes the greatest victory isn't defeating that darkness. It's helping it find the light. The sun dipped below the horizon, and long shadows stretched over Riverstone's quiet streets. But these shadows no longer carried fear. They were reminders of how far the town had come and how far it could still go. The violence was over. What came next was harder. The process of healing, rebuilding, and learning that true strength comes not from fear, but from unity. And it had all started with a single phone call from a 90-year-old police veteran who refused to give up on her town, or the people in it, even the ones who thought they were beyond redemption. 1 year later, Riverstone had become something no one could have predicted. The morning sun rose over a town that hadn't just survived its darkest chapter. It had rebuilt itself through it. Peggy Thompson, Dow 91, sat in her familiar booth at Diana's Diner, quietly watching the street outside. The Riverstone Police Department still maintained its presence, but it had evolved into something more than a law enforcement unit. Their old precinct had become a community support center, offering job training, counseling, and mentorship for anyone trying to rebuild their life. Morning, Miss Peggy, called a familiar voice. It was James, once known as Snake Tattoo. His leather vest still carried the Shadow Viper's insignia, but above it was a new patch. Riverstone PD Civilian Auxiliary. How's the mentorship program going, James? Peggy asked as he joined her, coffee in hand. Pretty good, he replied with a grin. Got 3 more former gang members starting next week. Word's spreading. Folks from other towns want to know how Riverstone did it. Through the diner window, Peggy could see the results for herself. Tom Mason's hardware store was thriving again, now run jointly by Tom and two former gang members who discovered they had a real talent for business. Diana's diner had become a gathering place where officers, veterans, and reformed men sat together, sharing stories over coffee. Iron Jack walked in, taking his usual seat across from Peggy. "Just got word from Marshall," he said. "He's getting early release for cooperation, and he still wants to join the team when he's out." Peggy smiled slightly, eyes warm with pride. "Good," she said. "Everyone deserves a second chance if they're willing to earn it." Peggy nodded. "We can always use people who understand both sides of the line." A moment later, Sarah Chen walked in carrying a thick folder. "The Department of Justice is interested in our rehabilitation program," she said. "They want to use Riverstone as a model for other cities facing similar challenges." "Tell them it's not about programs," Peggy replied. "It's about believing that people can change if you give them the chance." Outside, the rumble of engines echoed through Main Street. Officers from the Riverstone Police Department's Community Watch rode alongside reformed Shadow Vipers. Their motorcycles were no longer symbols of intimidation, but of unity. They were headed toward the old warehouse district, now being redeveloped into affordable housing and small local businesses. "Remember when this all started?" Captain Jack Iron asked, watching the riders pass. "One phone call," Peggy said softly. "One phone call," Jack agreed. "But it was never just about that," Peggy added. "It was about showing people a different kind of strength." Diesel, now the civilian coordinator for the Community Watch program, appeared in the doorway. "They're ready for you at the ceremony, Peggy." The event was held in Riverstone's town square, where a new memorial was being dedicated, not to conflict or victory, but to transformation. The crowd represented every part of Riverstone: police officers, former gang members, business owners, and families, all standing together. When Peggy stepped to the podium, she paused for a moment, looking out over the faces before her. Each one told a story of change, redemption, and the power to start again. "A year ago," she began, "Riverstone stood at a crossroads. We could have chosen vengeance. We could have fought hate with hate, but instead we chose something harder. We chose to believe in the power of change." Behind her, the new memorial stood tall, engraved with simple words: "Strength through unity, peace through understanding." "Look around you," Peggy continued. "What you see isn't just a town that survived. It's proof that the hardest battles aren't fought with weapons or force, but with courage, compassion, and the willingness to see the good in others, even when they can't see it in themselves." As she spoke, a single motorcycle approached the square. The rider was Havoc's younger brother, recently released from jail. He had written to Peggy months earlier, asking if Riverstone's second chances extended to family. Her reply had been simple: "Come home. We'll help you find your way." Peggy looked out across the square and smiled. "We've built something here that's stronger than fear," she said. "Something that can't be broken, because it's founded not on power over others, but on power with them." That's the real legacy of Riverstone. The applause that followed wasn't just for Peggy. It was for everyone who had helped rebuild the town, for the officers who had protected it, for the citizens who had chosen forgiveness, for the people who had found the courage to change. Later that evening, as the sun dipped low over Riverstone, Peggy sat on her porch with Jack and Sarah. The sound of distant motorcycles no longer carried tension, only a reminder of how far the town had come. "You know," Jack said thoughtfully, "when you made that first call, I thought we were just clearing out a gang problem." "So did I," Peggy admitted with a faint smile. "But sometimes the best victories are the ones you never plan for." A group of children rode past on bicycles, followed by two community watch riders, not because the kids needed protection, but because the officers had become part of the neighborhood's extended family. "They're calling it the Riverstone Miracle," Sarah said quietly. Peggy smiled, her eyes reflecting the sunset. "It wasn't really a miracle," she said. "It was just people discovering their better selves. Sometimes they just need someone to believe they can." As night fell, Lights flickered on in homes and businesses across Riverstone. The town was alive with conversation and laughter. Neighbors sharing meals, stories, and plans for the future. The darkness that once held fear now held only hope. And somewhere in that quiet, peaceful night, a 91-year-old retired police chief sat watching over the community she had helped save, knowing that the greatest battles aren't the ones fought against others, but the ones fought for them. That had been Riverstone's true victory. Not defeating an enemy, but transforming one. Not winning a war, but ending the need for one. It had all begun with one phone call, and it was love. Courage and belief in the power of change that had finished it. And in the end, that made all the difference. And so the town of Riverstone stood not as a story of victory over violence, but as proof that real strength comes from unity, compassion, and second chances. One phone call had sparked it all, but it was belief, courage, and community that carried it through. In the end, Riverstone didn't just rebuild its streets, it rebuilt its soul. This is the Last Command Police, where every story reminds us that even in the toughest times, there's always a way forward.